my great pleasure to welcome to our 2024 Online Trend Summit, Kate Cawley, founder of Veris Strategies and Future Food Movement, James Toop from Bite Back 2030, and Steve Challouma, Chief Marketing Officer of Nomad Foods. What are we going to be talking about today? Well, healthy and sustainable diets, what they are, what they mean, why this is even a thing and why it's important, how we engage consumers, crucially, in this, and where all of this meets commercial reality and the role that we all play as industry and brands and policy, and of course, all of you as well attending the summit. Thanks everyone for joining today. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to our virtual stage.
Great to be here, Charles. Thank you.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. So let's jump in. And a question for you all, I guess, a quick round the table. Let's start with intros, who you all are, what you do, and give us one line on your business.
So I'm James Toop, Chief Executive of Bite Back. Bite Back is a youth activist movement working to redesign the food system for child health and for sustainability. We have 100 brilliant youth activists aged 14 to 21 around the country working on this policy area.
Super, super exciting. Really looking forward to your input today. Kate, tell us an intro.
Yes, my name is Kate Cawley. I'm the founder of Future Food Movement, and we are a community for the food industry, anyone working in food to come and learn about climate and health. And basically, we're all about plugging the skills gap to give people the confidence to act and participate.
Excellent, brilliant. Welcome, Kate. Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Challouma. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Nomad Foods, which is one of the largest frozen food companies in the world, which owns some of the most loved frozen food brands across the UK and Europe. So we operate across 22 markets across Europe with brands that you will have heard of like Bird's Eye, Aunt Bessie's and Goodfellas in the UK and many others across Europe.
Amazing.
Glad to be here.
Thanks, Steve, very much indeed. Right. Let's start at the beginning. Increasingly across our industry and everyone in the audience and obviously us on the call today, we're hearing increasingly this term healthy, sustainable diets. It rolls off the tongue really, really well. Kate, I want to start with you. Can you give us a bit of a debunk? Give us the background, explain the term. What does it mean? Where does it come from?
So I think healthy, sustainable diets is really about we're starting to connect that what we are putting on our plates, what we are eating, has an impact not just on our own health, human health, but also the health of the planet. And I think there's been so much focus on achieving net zero, where we need to transform as a net zero food system, and rightly so. But there's now the recognition that actually we won't achieve that without diet shift. Right. So yeah, really, it's about kind of making sure that it's a challenge, but there are no trade-offs between providing healthy, nutritious food that is also good for the planet, has a low environmental impact, supports nature, supports biodiversity, etc., etc.
Brilliant. Okay. And it feels like this has come about just over the last couple of years. Is that fair to say, or actually is this concept been around much longer than that?
I think that, and James has been working in the campaigning space for many years, campaigning for better, healthier foods has always been there. But I think the connection between the planet and climate, it has massively risen up the agenda over the last few years, for sure.
Brilliant. Well, on that point, James, can you give us your perspective on this? How and where does the whole human health and health and nutrition and ESG, where does that meet for young people? And what are they saying to you, and how do they feel about the food industry and food policy and everything that's happening in that space?
Yeah, so we launched 5 years ago, and we started very much off in the health space. Right. Very much from young people want to be healthy. Over 90% of young people we've surveyed want that. We've just started to do some work on the sustainability side. Obviously, that generation, climate's a massive issue for them. But our young people basically say to us that it should be easy to be healthy, but it isn't at the moment. For many of them, the cultural wallpaper is unhealthy, ultra-processed food, often junk food, and that's impacting their health. And also they're seeing the impact on the planet. So what they're looking for is for companies to, the food brands they know and love, to step up and be more responsible. That means for them, like selling more healthy food. So we did a report back in February that showed that 7 of the 10 biggest food manufacturers in the world make the majority of their money selling high-fat, salt and sugar food, unhealthy food. They also want companies to be honest. So we did a second report showing that 78% of those of products sold by those companies that are targeted at children, that have cartoon characters, that type of thing, that they are actually unhealthy too. So these companies say they don't market to children, but actually they do, and they promote to children. And they actually want companies to be promoting the healthy options as well. So we did a billboard campaign over the summer talking about how just junk food is in the spotlight for kids all the time, from the moment they switch on their phones, when they go to school, on buses. And actually, we want to level the playing field and put healthy food in the spotlight. And I think their message really has been that we are seeing just a growing weight of evidence coming out about the impact that unhealthy food is having on our health and also on the health of the planet. We want to look, if you're leading a food business today and you want to speak to your grandkids in 50 years' time, right? Which side of history do you want to be on, knowing the impact that this is having on our health and our diets? Like that's the message our young people are trying to say. There's a moment in time for us to get this right, and they want the companies to step up and be responsible.
What are some of the kind of anecdotes then? Because I've had the pleasure of speaking to some of your youth activists in various different events, but can you just bring to light for us, like when they talk about like our high streets and those, like what are some of the types of things that they say? How do they articulate that?
So they would, say something like, from the moment I wake up, right, I'll switch on my phone, I'll go onto Instagram. What I'll see is an influencer promoting me an energy drink, right? That's probably some YouTuber that's come on. I'll then go to get the bus to school. What I'll see is an advert at a bus stop for a fast food brand, or similarly sort of high sugar drink. I'll then get off the bus onto the high street. There's a convenience store, lots of kids hanging around it. Typically, what's there is wall-to-wall chocolate crisps. You might go to a retailer. What's in the retailer? Well, actually, often there's promotions for the unhealthy options. So everything around them, the cultural wallpaper, the advertising, the messaging, the price promotions, it's all towards the unhealthy, cheap, ultra-processed foods. And so actually, that's the bit they want to change. Or similarly, they might also go in and try, even if they're trying to be healthy, right? They might be buying a drink that says no added sugar, added vitamin B12, but actually, if it's even a fruit smoothie, there can often be as much sugar in some of those fruit smoothies as there are in energy drinks, but it's hidden by the message, the health claim that there's no added sugar. And so even when they're trying to be healthy, and we see the same thing with cereal bars, protein bars, they can't be healthy. They're being misled by the marketing and the health claims.
And for you, there's a genuine a belief, and the evidence for you supports the fact that actually they want to make a healthy choice. Is that right? Because I think sometimes we think about, you'll hear, I might hear, an older generation make sweeping statements about our youth and about the choices that they make. But from the work that you've done, you're saying they actually want to make a positive, healthy choice.
Yeah, I think that health for this generation, you would look at things like alcohol consumption, right? Tobacco, it's a much more health conscious generation. But they are also very price limited, and they're also, as children, very susceptible to marketing and advertising. So there is a real thing, and I think we've seen this sort of play out quite with the Labour government as well, the need to protect children from the influences at a very young age, when if all the messages and cues you're seeing are to create emotional attachments to big brands that are then priced very cheaply, that's then pulling young people in and starting to build that brand affinity, and even with something like energy drinks, right, addiction to those products at a young age.
I'm going to turn to you now as the marketing director for an international food business that produces, as you were just stating, some of the nation's favourite food products and brands. it feels like it's a bit stacked against you potentially. Health and sustainability. How and where do they combine with commerciality? And I suppose there's a supplementary question to that. How much is it a priority for you, and what is the role of kind of Nomad's Foods in all this?
No, absolutely. I really love the question, and also James's answer there. And my perspective, our perspective is that the odds aren't stacked against us actually, because beyond ensuring commercial success, health and sustainability are absolutely core to what we do and define who we are as a business. So I like the way James put it there, putting healthy food in the spotlight. That's something we welcome with open arms. So just to expand on both the health and sustainability aspect of that. So health is fundamental to our business strategy and our portfolio. Reflects that. So 2/3 of our revenue come from healthy protein and vegetables. So 25% from vegetables, over 40% from healthy proteins like fish. Now these are segments and categories in which people aren't eating enough of. People in general aren't getting their 5 a day or 2 portions of fish a week. And beyond that, 94% of our revenues are from non-HFSS products. Even our Goodfellas pizza range is 100% non-HFSS. We've been very intentional, not just around the responsibility to make these products healthier, but actually commercially, and in the UK, it gives you a license to operate, especially given the restrictions on promotion feature and regulations on advertising. So it's a theme that we feel confident to lean into going forward. And if we turn to the sustainability aspect, then we see the things as going hand in hand, because the core segments that we operate in are in categories that by their nature have a relatively lower impact on the environment from a carbon perspective, for example, such as vegetables and fish. And allied to that, the way we actually manufacture and source the products is sustainable also. So if you take our fish, then we're the biggest buyer of Marine Stewardship Council fish, sustainable fish. It's 99.5% of our portfolio is coming from sustainable sources. We've similar kind of practices from a veg and potatoes point of view. And then on top of that, we're a frozen business. And so, we've got an opportunity to leverage the unique benefits that freezing brings, both from a health and sustainability perspective, because we know from a health point of view, freezing naturally locks in goodness, sometimes better than fresh food in the case of vegetables. And in terms of sustainability, frozen food can help minimize food waste, which can reduce environmental impact from food and also save consumers money. So we feel big responsibility as a leader to do the right thing, making sure such food is accessible, nutritious, good value for money without compromising on taste. And actually it becomes a commercial opportunity. So it's a positive holy trinity for us.
Is this also is it a priority for you across the organisation? So is it in your DNA, right from the boardroom across your business culture, and how have you gone about making it so?
It is. I mean, it's a business priority for us because the core segments that we operate in are in the healthy, sustainable diet space, and it's where we make our money, quite frankly. So we're incentivized commercially to sell more products that are good for both people and planet. If we sell more vegetables, more peas, that's good for the business and that's good for people's health and it's good for the planet. So that's a wonderful place to be. It's something that when people join the business and they really, especially when they buy into that the frozen benefit on top of that, then what you're doing is, our commercial priorities are perfectly balanced with the need to drive for healthy and sustainable diet. On top of that, as a leader, we're always looking for ways to drive the industry agenda further and go go that extra mile, because that helps to develop our category leadership credentials. So a really good recent example, I don't know if you've come across this, is the results of a 12-month study around freezer temperatures. And what we were able to demonstrate is that you could safely increase freezer temperatures from 18, which is minus 18, which is something that's been around for 100 years, to minus 15, which throughout the supply chain can reduce energy consumption and costs and carbon impact by 11%. So could have a massive, not just national, but global impact if we achieve that. And then the final thing I'd say is we're a listed company. We're on the New York Stock Exchange. So from an investor perspective, for sure, health and sustainability and broader ESG considerations are being applied as non-financial factors as part of investors' analysis process. So that's something we need to take seriously from a multi-stakeholder perspective. That's
super inspiring, I think, and you're really saying that it can be done, right? These things can work in harmony. They can work in balance. They can. I think we are, by the nature of our business and range and history and portfolio, I feel very lucky to not have anything not to be part of the problem, if you see what I mean. We see very much part of the solution, and actually we see a big opportunity because frozen food as a category still has stigma. That it's somehow not as good for you as fresh, that there's nasties in it, when 99.5% of our range, there's no artificial flavor. You don't need preservatives. Freezing is nature's preservative, right? So we're on a mission to kind of break down those barriers, because there are so many. The stars are aligning in a way for our kind of food, so it's nothing to be defensive about. No one's perfect. We can always improve, but we see a big opportunity to lean into and be vocal about. James, in your experience, is there a risk that as our youth becomes better educated, empowered, they've got much more of a voice, that they could, and hear everything that Steve's said there, but that they could turn their back on some of the nation's favourite foods if they feel that industry more broadly isn't affecting these issues? And I suppose the scenario could be, imagine if that generation turned its back on shop bought lasagna, as an example. Is that what they talk about? Is that a potential reality?
I don't think we talk about foods. I think we try to be really careful about not labeling food as good or bad, right? I think but I think what they might do is start to turn their backs on some of the nation's current favorite brands, and the companies behind those products. And that goes back to, I think, the core provision. I mean, what Steve articulated, I agree, is like hugely inspiring. And we want more companies with that vision for healthy, sustainable diets being the ones that lead in the future and the ones that are growing. And so, and that comes down to leadership, vision, and then also putting that into action through your, what you actually deliver, the products you deliver, and then the tactics you use and promote them. So what we don't want to see are, fast food outlets opening near schools, right? Because they know they're going to pick up business off children, or shops opening within a near vicinity. We don't want to see companies sending young people multiple texts and emails with promotions and discounts at a time when they know they might be hungry. We don't want to see misleading health claims on products. I think what might happen, and you've seen it happen with climate, you've seen it happen with things like fast fashion. It's not like kids are against clothes. They're against the companies, right, that profit off cheap, unsustainable fashion. And I think it's the companies and the tactics where we want to see action. And so we for the first time this year, one of our young people went to the Nestle AGM to actually challenge Nestle on their record on healthy, sustainable diets. And I think what you might start to see is more young people challenging the companies and the brands on their behavior, rather than the actual food types themselves. I suppose a natural follow-on question from that, and Kate, I want to get everyone's perspective on this, but Kate, I'll start with you. Is do we feel like we're making any progress on these fronts, and what evidence do we see, if any, that some progress is being made?
I think there are definitely leaders and laggards in the sector, and obviously Steve and Nomad are definitely one that we always use as someone that's doing a good job and leading on this. I think if you look at the retailers, I think Sainsbury's are doing a really good job. They've got a very clear, transparent target on healthy sales. I think Tesco's are also actually doing some pockets of brilliant work, particularly with their better baskets, and kind of one of the things that I think is we haven't talked about yet, but is the whole kind of food environment, making it kind of the easiest, most accessible choice. And it's not just about price, it's making sure that it's available for people. And I think Tesco's have done are doing some really good work with their healthy, sustainable diets team and trying to kind of enhance the shopper experience. And then I think from a supplier perspective, you've got people, because this isn't all just about plants, it's really important that we're much more plant-centric in our diets, but also how we are producing needs to be done in a much more regenerative way. So you've got some brilliant regenerative brands, particularly on the dairy side. Actually, the dairy sector, I must call out for doing a great job in moving as one. And I think First Milk and Yo Valley, brilliant, producing, you know, really nutrient dense, climate smart products, effectively linking to kind of soil health and the like. And I think also it's easy to just talk about retail, but I think food service and hospitality hugely important in influencing what we eat. And I think Compass actually are doing some brilliant work under Caroline Ball's guidance with net zero, but they're taking the approach. It was super interesting I was with them last week. They're basically taking the health by stealth approach, which I think, you know, rather than expecting the consumer to make the right decision, they're kind of supporting them to make the decision without them realizing it. And they're having some really strong results on that.
Just making it appealing and delicious in health.
Yes. Exactly, making it the default choice, I think.
James, what about from your perspective? I mean, you've called out, I think, some of the scenarios when it isn't necessarily working for future generations. But are there examples of where you see actually some progress being made?
Yeah, I think I would mention a lot of the same companies that Kate mentioned, and it's probably is fair to say at the moment that the companies that are making progress are in the minority and not in the majority. And I think that's one thing that needs to change. I'd add to that our research, which was looking at the percentage of sales that come from healthier products, called out Danone as having a much healthier portfolio than the rest of the companies. And also when we looked at climate targets, they had set meaningful 2030, 2050 targets as well. The other thing our young people are often kind of looking at are challenger brands and sort of some of the newer companies. So a company like Dash, which I think actually performs really well on health and on sustainability, kind of using wonky fruit, but is starting to tap into and challenge the soft drinks industry. So it's not just there's things that I think we like about Dash. It's not just the product; it's also the way they're speaking out and challenging some of the more traditional, bigger soft drinks companies who are sort of much less strong for health and doing it in a public way. So as well as those companies, what we're looking for is not just the companies, right, who are doing it through the products they sell, but it's also companies who want to speak out in the media and sort of create more of the political space for wider change to come. Because I think for the minority to go to the majority, what we need is regulation to kind of stimulate this and to push it forward. And Nomad have done that. Tesco, Sainsbury's have been quite public and vocal about wanting to see the change. And I think we need more companies speaking up in the media to politicians, kind of saying that that there needs to be wider regulation and policy in this space.
Brilliant. We're going to touch a little bit more on that in a few moments' time. But Steve, anything that you would add to that narrative on kind of best case examples and progress that's being made?
Yeah, I think the examples noted by Kate and James are the really good ones and the ones that I would point to. So certainly what the retailers and the engagement we feel as well from Tesco and Sainsbury in particular. Danone, we also are, have got a good relationship with on the nutrition front in particular. I think lots of food businesses are attempting within their portfolios to bring healthier options, but it's always going to be relatively minor, for the foreseeable future. And is it going to make a material impact? Would be the question. But if you're a well-positioned food company with a strong portfolio, there doesn't need to be that trade-off for you. So, as I've mentioned already, the way we see it is the opposite in terms of our role. But yeah, I think those are good examples that James and Kate
Brilliant. I want to just talk a little bit about consumer behavior, and very often movements in consumer behavior and buying habits and so on are driven by consumers. But is in this particular scenario, is it consumers that are driving this? And if not, why not? I think I'll start with you, Steve, if that's all right.
So clearly it's been a interesting couple of years with the cost of living crisis, right? So price and value has been first and foremost. I think the hygiene factors in terms of taste and convenience are always there. What we have seen for sure is definitely an increase in terms of motivation in health.
Right.
Yeah, so especially amongst youth, and maybe there's an opportunity here. Youth are far more, or younger consumers are far more health aware and making choices for certain foods and nutrients. Obviously there's a bit of dichotomy there and challenge, but certainly for shop bought food and driver of meal occasions in home, which I can talk to, health as a driver has risen. Sustainability is more difficult. I'd say, consumers anticipate and expect, especially from brands, that if they are paying more for you, that they're just trusting that you're doing the right thing. But they're not necessarily, especially in a more economically challenged time, they're not necessarily as willing to pay more for more sustainable choices as a whole. So we've seen probably health grow as a driver in consumer behavior, and sustainability in the last couple of years decline a little.
And do you think, do consumers make the connection between, we're talking very happily here about healthy, sustainable diets, that is to say, do you think consumers do they make that connection in any way in your experience?
We don't really see that in an explicit way. I think, it's not something they actively think about a lot, and they naturally always connect. I think they with the small amount of education, it's quite logical, isn't it? But I think in some segments, for sure, people have broad awareness. Red meat, for example. I think long, very well publicized around the potential health challenges of eating too much red meat or processed meat products. And the carbon impact of meat, for example. So I think at a general level, but not at a very deep level.
Okay. James, from a youth perspective, what are you seeing from that point of view? Is youth making the connection between health and sustainability?
I think I'd echo what Steve said. I think that from a health perspective, I think that they're looking for healthier options, right? And I think probably believe too much the health halos that some products give themselves, and I think that's one area. The misleading health claims, the cartoon characters on products that could be really regulated. There's no place for a health claim on a high fat, salt and sugar product. So I think they are being a bit misled when they're looking for healthier options. And on the sustainability, I think Steve's right. It does sort of boil down to, it's actually more about the food products and food type itself. So, eating less meat or going vegetarian, vegan, they're probably more at that level. I don't think they're making the connection between the climate impact of some of these big food companies. So a report that we released in September showed that the top 10 food manufacturers, again, their global emissions are bigger than the international aviation sector. Right. And so I don't think anybody is quite yet making the connection between the emissions impact of these companies and the fact that a lot of them don't have credible climate reduction plans. So I don't think we really think beyond sort of going eat less meat, eat less dairy, think about the carbon impacts of the companies, let alone the food waste point that Steve talked about. So I think there's more to do around that. And I think ultimately we want, when you're going, if you want to be a climate activist, right, that can start in the supermarket, right? When you're going around the store, you can be making a massive impact on the climate through that. And I think so yeah, making those connections clearer, I think, is a big space for we want sort of climate activists and food activists like demonstrating how much they care in the supermarket.
And whose responsibility then, Steve? I'll ask you this, if that's right. Whose responsibility is it in? Because there's clearly an education piece. If we're serious about this, we need to educate, inform, we need to drive some awareness around and create some even more demand for healthy, sustainable food. So, where does the responsibility lie?
Well, I think the responsibility lies with us as an industry, and it's certainly one that we take seriously. So, if you look at the scale impact that we can have, we're present in over 8 billion meals a year. So, that's a huge privilege that we have, but there's a responsibility to educate consumers that we feel. So, it operates at different levels. It's partly about doing the basics well, right? So, being transparent. On product reformulation and claims on pack, to James's point, responsible portion sizes, clear and transparent health information on pack, and even healthier cooking methods. So, one interesting, very small insight, our peas, we recommend as the primary cooking method, microwaving, because actually you lose less. You preserve more of the vitamins versus cooking them in a pan. So there's a little tip for you. Then on top of that, it's through communication and engagement. So through your earned, owned, and paid channels, how can you use your brand platform to drive awareness of health and the healthiness of your range? But also importantly, people don't want too much to be told about to be healthy, right? So what you need to do is make those healthy products desirable and drive the taste appeal and inspire them, because often the healthy foods are often not the ones that consumers get excited about. So, for example, in vegetables, we've got a vision to transform the perception of frozen veg from something that's just in the freezer to get a portion of peas to actually position the category as a modern meal hack. So how can you use frozen veg in really interesting, inspiring ways for a broad set of recipes? So you're competing, to James's point, with quite exciting, stuff, like, as he said, on social media that you see and through influencers, less healthy, competitive, but often more exciting for mealtime. So you need to be able to compete on that inspiration and excitement as well. So yeah, the answer is yes, we do feel a responsibility for that.
And James, do you see the responsibility that's solely with brands and manufacturers, or is there a role for policy in all of this as well?
I think both, but I'm so reassured and pleased to hear Steve's response for that, because the typical industry response that we hear is that yes, we do need to educate consumers. We try this and it doesn't work because consumers don't buy it, and that's not an argument that we buy. Like the reality is we hear things like, oh, there's this new consumer trend for chocolate cereal. Like I don't think consumers wake up and suddenly go, do you know what I want for breakfast? I want chocolate, right? What's happened is somebody has gone and they're probably selling a product like Oreos, which when I was a kid was a biscuit. Now you've got Oreo cereal. They've seen a market opportunity to put something that they know if they whack it on a supermarket shelf, a kid or a parent who's a bit tired, right, is going to go, all right, yeah, we can put that in the trolley. They'll do a similar thing. There's Oreo yogurts, right? Like these brands are spreading out and spotting opportunities and creating demand. So the responsibility from our perspective is all on the company. And actually then it's making it harder for brands like Steve's then, which are trying to put health in the spotlight, to actually have a starring role. And so there's a big responsibility on companies. But I think what we know is that those companies aren't going to change. They're not going to change their behavior. They can't change their behavior in a big scale way, because often they've got investors who want short-term financial return. If the CEO goes too far out of their lane, they're probably going to get fired. So we need ultimately government regulation to come in and create this level playing field and stop some of this bad behavior, short-term profit making at the expense of healthy, sustainable diets.
And what does that look like, James, for you?
So I think there does, I would also fully accept, right, that Bite Back and other NGOs are very much often on the side of, seen as the side of the nanny state, where we're very good at all these things we want to stop. So, I've mentioned a few already in this conversation around misleading health claims, around stopping cartoon characters on products. I think we need to end price promotions on HFSS products, not just sort of buy one, get one free. Now, a lot of those bog off deals have now come on to kind of, when you have a card or some type of promotion mechanism. I think we need to sort of stop all those promotions on the unhealthy products. So there are those types of things. We've got the advertising restrictions, and I think the government needs to go further and just stop the advertising of HFSS products. But I am also cognizant that we need more incentives, right, to actually stimulate the growth of healthier options. And I think that's something, if we introduced a new tax on unhealthy food, the revenue generated from that tax could then go across to subsidize healthier options to make them cheaper, make them more affordable for families. So there's an increasing incentive. If, I think there could be some interesting sort of, if you are advertising healthier options, do you start to get, or if you have a healthier portfolio, do you start to get tax breaks if you have new product development that's actually in the healthy space rather than the unhealthy space? Do you get tax incentives to try introducing those into the product? So I think there needs to be a bit of both sides. And I would acknowledge on the NGO side that we've been a bit too much on the stop this, ban this, but if we're going to make this transition, we've got to incentivize the shift at the same time, both for businesses and for consumers.
Steve, James mentioned there about this notion, and we've all, everyone here has heard it. We tried it, and consumers don't want to buy it. Is that your experience?
No, it's not our experience at all. I would say. I think even if you are communicating on health and sustainability benefits, then if that's not cutting through, then and this is partly as a marketeer, that's a reflection of the creative impact of your messaging and the media you're using and how you're reaching people. So I find that a unacceptable excuse in a way, and not a reason to give up. So I think finding the right way. I mean, we've spoken a lot about youth, but you need to engage with youth in different ways than we're conventionally used to. We're investing far more in social media platforms, gaming. You've got to meet consumers where they are with messages that. The key thing I say is it can't be you actually have to inspire consumers. You can't be preachy. They will reject being preachy. You've got to make it entertaining, interesting, thought-provoking to get the pull for these things. But I find it too lazy an excuse to say we tried it and it didn't work.
And that almost takes us down to, because I'm conscious a lot of the people on the call and listening to this session today will be in product innovation, R&D type roles. If we take it down to sort of product level, what are some of the attributes, either from a comms perspective or actually the ingredients, the makeup, the cuisines, the recipe, right down to the product level? What are some of those attributes and those traits? Kate, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to quickly reflect on the consumer question, I personally think, and from the conversations that we're having within our community, we cannot wait for the consumer to take us there. We as an industry, and I think this is a business ethics piece, we have to take the consumer with us. And this is about just doing the right thing. I feel very, very strongly about that. And just because businesses, not all of them are as forward thinking as Nomad, but by any means, because they're not being pulled along by the consumer, they're not seeing that consumer demand, they're not getting stimulus and pressure from investors, they're sort of parking this, and that is just morally and ethically the wrong thing to do. And that's why, just to back up what James was saying, we desperately need the right policy in place, because we hear too often, oh, well, we need a level playing field, there's no first mover advantage, which I can see, but there really is no time to wait on this. And there will ultimately be the winners and losers, I think, but also we're also only as good as our poorest supplier. Like, we do need to be pulling everybody along with us. So, sorry, what was the actual question you wanted me to answer?
Thanks for that. I wanted to just get your perspective on, if we take this down to a product level, and some of the attributes that we expect to see, because I'm conscious a lot of the people listening today come from a product development, R&D, culinary perspective. Let's take it down to products. What are some of those?
Really interestingly, we're running at the moment a healthy sustainable diets accelerator. We've got about 40 people on it, and they're predominantly NPD and commercial, a different audience, but a really critical audience. And the discussions are really interesting, and it's as much as imparting knowledge as it is giving people the space and time to have these conversations, because this is hard. This is really, really hard. And I think the big problem with the food industry is how short term we all are, and nobody has any time to really immerse themselves in what's a wicked problem. But I think what is coming quite strongly that we're hearing through the NPD teams is they want to be designing products around that positive consumption kind of framework. They want to be designing products that are good for people, good for the planet. But the two challenges that they're being kind of faced with the time one, and also being given enough time to create a product that will really land and work. They're not given enough time to develop it. They're not given it enough time on shelf at all to be able to land, and that they're always trying to, whilst reformulation is going to get us part of the way, we actually need to be designing products that are new and innovative. Otherwise, they're always going to be compared to what they're trying to replace, which is a challenge. And I think the other thing that's come out really strongly, which has really, I find really sad, is that they all want to make change, but there is this big fear of failure and being seen, particularly most of them work for big food businesses. They are worried about being seen as disruptive, being seen, and failure is not allowed. But so I think it's really challenging for NPD teams, really challenging.
How do you face into that, Steve, within your organisation? Just building on what Kate's had to say.
Oh, absolutely. So there's a few things I'd say. I mean, it starts with what materials, what the chassis of your business is in a way, right? So if you take something like fish, it's got unique nutritional elements in terms of omega-3, selenium, iodine, and there's a really strong. So you start with a strong base point, but respecting the fact that we work in all kinds of food elements of the food industry. I think there's a couple of things. So the first thing I would say in the short term is, how can you hardwire health and sustainability in your innovation process? Even from a gatekeeping, most food businesses have a gatekeeping process, and are you asking the right questions to have sustainability and health almost by design and stealth, so that progressively over time, your formulations, your portfolio is progressive from that point of view. The second is more fundamental around strategy and portfolio choices, right? So which segments are you going to back, that where you see a holy trinity between right to win from a brand point of view, an attractiveness from a market point of view, and something that will allow you to be more on a front foot from a health and nutrition and with that movement and contribute to the issue. So it comes down also to portfolio, the strategy of a business, and do you want to sustain in that kind of more processed, unhealthy, non-HFSS, or how are you going to tactically and then strategically evolve the business?
And I think, just to build on what Steve said as well, there is one policy kind of conversation out there, right, which would make all of this a lot more transparent, and that is making the FDTP mandatory. So actually getting companies to have to report on the percentage of sales that come from healthy, sustainable diets. And, the companies where we've seen this really work, and like NPD teams, have almost been given a remit, because there's been a target set from the top of the company that's driven through the business that says actually healthy, sustainable diets are a priority. We want to grow our sales in that segment. So actually the whole business drives towards that target. So it's hard if you're in that team, right, without the leadership from the business that's also then supported by the board and backed by the investors to make that change. And I do, it's hard, right, if you are a business with a predominantly portfolio that is unsustainable, unhealthy food to make those changes. But I think we almost in that case need the opposite of the recent Mars acquisition of all the Kellanova snacks, right? We need companies buying into healthier, sustainable segments, not doubling down on unhealthy, unsustainable segments. And so, your acquisition, it could be M&A, it could be MPD, but I think you have to really be asking yourself in today's climate, if you're doing any product that's HFSS, right? Like, why are you doing it? Like, surely now there's enough evidence that is not the way to go.
That, James, a really nice segue into my next question, really, which is, we talked about the things that we should do and some cases of best practices and some great examples. Can we just zero in on why, as an industry, we should get behind this and drive it? And fundamentally, what happens if we don't? Start with you, if that's okay, James.
I think I've been reading a book recently called The Good Ancestor. And one of the big arguments is about time horizons. So at the moment, we're probably thinking about 3-month cycles or 6-month reporting cycles. And we need to be thinking 30, 60 years, probably 100, 200 years down the line. And we need to be not thinking just about what we're earning today, but actually what are we leaving to our grandchildren and their children. And so the moral argument that Kate has been talking to, and I think we've talked about the time perspective, I think we need to kind of completely reshift our perspectives on the impact we want to leave on people and the planet, because ultimately at the moment we are profiting not just at the expense of children's health today, but you're profiting at the expense of our children's planet in the future. And if that isn't a reason to act and make a change, I don't know what is.
Thanks for that, James. Steve, what's your thoughts on that?
I agree with James. I mean, I think as an industry, we need to be driving change because consumers expect it from us, and if we don't, there'll be consequences for them from a health point of view. Put even higher burden on health services, on society. So to Kate's point, there's that kind of moral imperative, but I think there's a commercial imperative as well, especially when you look at sustainability. So our supply chains are impacted by issues like climate change. So if we continue to have the increase in temperatures, that'll impact yields from growing vegetables and from fish, catch of the fish as well. If you don't fish sustainably, there won't be any fish. You won't have a business. So if you don't take responsibility in the long run, it'll impact. It'll be existential for the business itself. Never before you get onto those sort of bigger societal impacts. And if the industry doesn't drive this, then that'll increase the chance that the regulation will need to be bigger and harsher. So the more industry can drive it itself, then the more industry will be in control of these issues.
And Kate, lastly, why should we as an industry? What happens if we don't?
Yeah, just to really echo what the guys have just said, but yeah, I think you can, even if you don't buy into the kind of the heart and emotion of this, there's the risk side. You only have to look at the adverse weather events, and that's only going to make it harder to grow and produce food. Costs will go through the roof, and then from a health perspective, the burden on society, this is going to cost us all personally, and from a business perspective as well. So even if you don't buy into that the humanity that's part of this, then the business risk is huge. But also, I do truly believe that it will become socially unacceptable for businesses not to act, and then there's the whole risk of not attracting talent, and actually us as an industry not being seen as somewhere you would want to work, a bit like the oil and gas industry. So yeah, kind of reputationally as well, I think is a really strong lever.
My last question to you is, look, we're talking here today to what, 2,000 people across the food and drink industry. Everyone on this call wants change and comes from a unique perspective. What would your kind of one takeaway, your piece of advice to the person that's listening to this, looking at their portfolio and going, like, how do we take the first step? James.
Two things, if I can be greedy. One is set a target, right, and be transparent about it. Because I think once you've got that, that becomes your guiding North Star to work off and drives you the business. And the second thing would be work with progressive businesses, NGOs, like join this movement for change in calling on the government to put the policies in place that are going to make it happen. Because at the moment, the voices of voices like Steve are in the minority. We hear more voices pushing back against regulation and progress, and we need more businesses that want to see this and want to see the positive conditions to allow them to be profitable and sustainable and healthy in the future come to fruition. And for that, we need that to be politically permissible, and we need more voices in that movement for change.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, James. Kate.
Yeah, I would just say everybody can use their voice, whether that's as an individual, but also as a business. We have to be the louder voice in all of this. I really feel strongly about this, but yeah, just also really get under the skin of the products that you are producing and how you are producing them, and have that transparency and honesty. And from that, start to build a plan effectively. And I know from the work that we do and through our network and community that all of the retailers would be, actively engaged with the supply chain to be coming up with solutions. Like, this is a big problem for them. They can see what's coming over the hill. So there is a huge commercial opportunity here to be kind of a much more strategic partner in this.
Steve, you speak from the perspective of a household name, brands that we all know and love. What would your point of inspiration, your key takeaway for someone listening to this to go and do something different and take action?
Yeah, the key guidance I would give is, how can you, in the area that you manage or influence, hardwire sustainability and health as a key filter. So, whether you're working on your annual plan, your 3-year strategy, portfolio development, your renovation plan, your NPD, how can you kind of hardwire that so that it doesn't become an afterthought, so it's at the core, and that over time it becomes a natural part of how you develop your brands and business.
Amazing. Look, I feel like we could continue this discussion and go on, but we've got to call it a day. Kate, Steve, James, a huge thank you from the Food People, the 2024 Summit audience, for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, your perspective, your challenge, your provocation to everybody listening today. Honestly, thank you for joining. It's been a huge pleasure to speak to you and inspiring the audience, hopefully, to do something different and affect change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Charles.